The biggest mistake I made when learning Arabic held me back for years. And in the case of many of my friends, it stopped them from learning altogether. If you're learning Arabic, if you're just about to start, the best advice I can give you to get fluent in the shortest possible time is to stop learning Arabic. Let me explain. Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. My name is Ryan from Arabic Workshop. I've been learning and speaking Arabic for over 20 years. Real, authentic communication in Arabic has allowed me to develop a deeper, meaningful relationship with the Quran. And it's given me access to literature that I just would not have had access to. It has also allowed me to communicate with others around the world on shared interests and to engage in meaningful and fairly big projects. As a busy medic, husband, and father of 3, I want to show you that you can quickly become fluent in Arabic in a natural, evidence-based way that fits into your life no matter how busy you are, and most importantly, keeps the joy in learning Arabic. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my journey learning Arabic and how fluency eluded me for a long time. I started off at the age of 18 or 19, popping into a library and picking up Teach Yourself Arabic by J.R. Smart. Within a few chapters, I was hooked. There was usually text with translation at the beginning, followed by an explanation, a vocabulary list, and then moving on to exercises. It was all very academic, and within a few short chapters, I realized that I needed something a bit more substantial, and I was recommended to start on the Medina books. The formula is pretty much the same in terms of lessons. There is usually a conversation followed by drills and exercises and explanations. However, the whole syllabus is carried out in Arabic. And I really did enjoy this course. However, after 7 to 8 years of being really good at grammar, really good at morphology, being able to break sentences down perfectly, but always needing my trusty dictionary. And you can see how much use I've got out of this. I would not even be able to estimate the number of visits I've made to this dictionary. 10 years in, I realized that this method of learning was just not getting me where I wanted to go. While this was giving me a good linguistic ability, a good ability to break down sentences and understand what was going on grammatically, I just lacked a decent level of vocabulary acquisition to be able to enjoy the language, to be able to communicate fluently without having to ask the meanings of words all the time. At the same time, I noticed that a lot of my friends who are very academically talented in other disciplines were giving up Arabic. They had used the same path as me, similar courses, all with the same formula, usually some sort of text that is read or listened to, followed by drills, worksheets, cold vocabulary lists. There was always a niggle at the back of my mind that there was something I was missing. I did have friends who had excelled in Arabic, and the thing that I noticed about them was that they hadn't engaged in formal instruction. So their main interest was engaging with native Arabs on topics of interest to them, asking interesting questions, hearing what people's opinions were, and reading interesting books when they did read. About 10 to 15 years into learning Arabic, I had a sort of casual relationship with Arabic. It might have been once a week or once every fortnight that I picked out my textbooks and did a really heavy lift. I wanted to get quite a few units done, something really meaty, so I could really understand the grammar, maybe look at a book that broke down sentences in the Quran, or listen to a heavy talk. The point was that it was very intense, but very irregular. And so I realized that I actually had to get to understand what was going on. What was the linguistic research telling us about acquiring language? And what I learned about were 2 key ideas in linguistics that put me on the fast track to rapid vocabulary acquisition, but in a way that was natural and wasn't so taxing in terms of my energy and allowed me to really enjoy the process. And those two ideas are, firstly, the distinction between learning a language and acquiring a language. And the second is that we acquire languages incidentally. And what I mean by that is we learn languages in an accidental and unintended way, but that this was a much more effective way of us to build our vocabulary. So let's take the first of those ideas, the distinction between learning and acquisition. Learning in this context is defined as formal instruction, that is set-piece conversations, that is cold vocabulary lists, isolated grammar, meaning grammatical concepts are isolated, and as much as possible, the original text is contrived. It removes the learner from authentic learning experiences and authentic use of language. On the other hand, acquisition is more a case of exposing yourself to input, and lots of it, and usually input that is at your level and comfortable. The main focus here is on understanding meaning and messages, and not so much on form and being accurate and having yourself corrected all the time. The idea is that you read or you listen in a way that's natural. You tolerate small amounts of noise, and by noise I mean words that you don't understand. But the point is, by understanding the general message, you're able to continue, and you're able to be relaxed, and you're able to enjoy the process. This combined with the idea that you learn incidentally. There are words that you will come across, and if you don't understand them, don't worry. You're going to come across them later. And if you don't come across them later, then it's not a word that you need to acquire. There isn't an urgency for you to acquire that. Now, when we think about how we're going to learn language by acquiring it rather than consciously learning it, we really need to think about how we learned our first language as children. When our parents were talking to us, their purpose was never really to teach us language. It was really to socialize us into society, to make us have the right behavior when it came to eating, clothing, doing all the basic functions that society requires of us. So the idea is that we're not constantly looking to correct ourselves or looking to correct others when it comes to language, but just allowing us to flow and allowing our brains to do self-correction. By constantly exposing ourselves to input, we're able to self-correct, and that is actually a stronger way for us to maintain and acquire language. In time, we will have an internal grammar. We will have an internal grammar that we can't necessarily put down to a rule, but we know when we've said something wrong or we've written something wrong. And you only need to think about how you self-correct in your first language to see what we're going for. So how did this newfound knowledge help me? The first thing it did was it gave me one simple strategy for acquiring language. Lots and lots of input. But it was input that I found interesting, not input that was crafted by someone else. It was input perhaps on a topic that I was familiar with, or if I wasn't familiar with it, I was really interested in it in the first place. And so by giving myself that context, I already prepared my brain to receive that knowledge where the language was secondary to the topic that I chose. I didn't have the stress of completing exercises, having deadlines to hand in homework. I didn't have to worry about rote learning of lists of vocabulary and then worry about how to recall them in the right setting, in the right time. Part of this strategy was that I avoided forced output. I would speak whenever things were interesting, and I felt a need to speak. So I was never trying to recall words in a forced scenario under pressure to perform and have that hinder my progress. Part of the learning acquisition hypothesis is the idea that output happens naturally, and it always lags from input. You're always going to understand at a level higher than you're able to output naturally. If you're just comfortable with the idea that your output lags from your input. You just know that you've just got to do more input to produce better output. So that allows you to just keep it very, very simple. The next thing it did for me was gave me access to authentic, real language use. I engaged with people on things of genuine interest to me. And so it also allowed me in that context to really understand what the difference was between authentic language strategies and fads that would come and go. So generally, things that I now consider fads are things that encourage superficial learning, things that require lots of rote memory, repetition, like SRS, flashcards, worksheets, all of that sort of thing. You see, the trouble is, as a learner, if you've not looked into linguistic literature and understood how language is acquired, every strategy, every product, every tool that comes to you seems like a good idea. The problem is a lot of strategies will actually hinder and slow down your progress. And I will cover this idea in a separate video. The next benefit I found was that I spent a lot less money on trying to become fluent. I truly believe that if you want to get fluent, it's possible for you to do it for free. There are plenty of resources out there for you to take an input-based approach and become fluent without spending a penny. What I found is that when I did spend money, I spent it on things that were very effective. And I'll share more of my experiences on that with you in the future. Last but not least, I was so enthused by what I had found in terms of improving my fluency that I felt moved to start the biggest project of my life, Arabic Workshop. Its aim was to bring input-rich storytelling to learners to allow them to get fluent in the shortest time possible and at the cheapest cost. And so if there's any message I would give you as a learner based on my experience, acquiring languages is a natural human superpower. The reason that we don't achieve it or we feel that we can't achieve it is quite often that we're taught it wrong and we're taught it in ways that just do not have a good evidence backing. Tied into all of this are some simple, actionable ideas about what good input is that'll help you on your way to fluency in Arabic. And that's the subject of my next video, which when it's ready will be linked just here. But if you're not interested in the theory and you just want to get on with learning, we've got a playlist of story listening just here.